Right now, somewhere in your house, tucked into a cardboard box or shoved to the back of a dusty shelf, one of these might be sitting untouched. And I do not mean a rare one. I mean the kind you played with as a kid, the kind somebody's grandmother wrapped in newspaper before the holidays, the kind that ended up in a garage because nobody could bear to throw it away, but nobody thought to look at it twice. That is exactly the mistake I want to help you fix today. We are going through 10 dusty old toys that are quietly worth real money, counting down from the least valuable to the one that is almost certainly hiding in your home right now. We are starting at number 10, and I want you to know this list only gets more surprising from here. Number 10 is the pressed steel dump truck, not plastic. Steel. If you have one sitting in a garage or a barn and it has a certain satisfying weight to it when you pick it up, that is your first clue you might have something. The ones worth real money were made by Structo or Tonka in the 1950s and early 60s. Tonka is the name most people know, but early Tonka pieces from that era, particularly the ones with a bright yellow cab and a separate red dump bed with pressed ridges running lengthwise, have been selling in the range of $120 to $250 in clean, unrestored condition. The Structo pieces, which tend to have a slightly more rounded cab design and a black steel undercarriage with visible rivet detail, can go for even more among the right buyers. The test here is simple. Pick it up. A genuine pressed steel truck from this era is noticeably heavy. We are talking about a child's toy that weighs close to what a hardback book weighs. Modern reproductions and plastic versions feel almost weightless by comparison. If yours passes the weight test, flip it over and look for a stamp or raised lettering on the undercarriage. Tonka stamped their name and sometimes the model number directly into the steel on the bottom. If that name is there, and the paint, though chipped, still shows the original factory color rather than a home repaint, you have a piece worth holding on to. Your dad or grandfather might have kept this one in a shed for decades without a second thought. Number 9. Let me talk about tin lithograph toy cars, specifically the battery-operated kind made in occupied Japan or post-war Japan between 1945 and the late 1960s. These are the ones with the intricate printed designs directly on the tin, often showing a car interior with a driver figure through the window, all printed rather than sculpted. The detail in those lithograph designs is what collectors are paying for. A clean example of a known manufacturer like Bandai, Marusan, or Yonezawa in working or near working condition can sell anywhere from $150 to over $400, depending on the model and the condition of the lithograph. Here is your check. Look on the bottom of the car or on the battery compartment door for country of origin text. Made in occupied Japan on the label means the piece was made between 1945 and 1952. Which is a specific dating window collectors care about. After that, pieces simply read Made in Japan. Both can have value, but the occupied Japan mark narrows the window and often raises the price. If your piece has that mark, it predates many people's parents. These turn up in attics constantly because grandparents kept them as display pieces after the kids grew up. Number 8. Cast iron mechanical banks. I know that sounds like something from a museum, but these sat on dresser tops in ordinary households for generations. The style I want you to focus on is the figural kind, where a lever or a coin triggers a small mechanical movement. A frog that opens its mouth, a clown that spins, a man on a mule. Genuine antique cast iron mechanical banks produced before 1940 can carry values from $300 into the thousands, but there are a significant number of reproductions on the market, and distinguishing them matters enormously. Here is the honest check for this one. Hold the piece and look at the joint lines where the two halves of the casting meet. On a genuine antique bank, those seam lines are slightly irregular, and the paint, if original, will have a kind of dry, absorbed quality, almost like it is part of the metal rather than sitting on top of it. Reproductions tend to have cleaner, more uniform seams and a paint finish that looks more like a modern coat. Also look for wear patterns that make physical sense. A bank that sat on a child's dresser for 40 years will show wear at the contact points, the base, the moving part, the coin slot. Artificial distressing tends to look uniform in ways that real use does not. At this level, if you find something that looks genuinely old and the mechanism still moves, it is worth having it looked at by a professional before you do anything with it. Now, before we go any further, I want to pause for a second. We have already covered pressed steel trucks, tin lithograph, battery-operated cars, and cast iron mechanical banks, and we are only at number 8. What I am about to show you in the next few items goes deeper than most people ever look, including the specific marks, model details, and physical tests that separate a piece worth donating from one worth protecting. If you want the full identification checklist I use, including photographs of the exact markings and the step-by-step questions collectors ask before they appraise anything, it is all in the Attic Collector's Complete Pack. You can scan the code on your screen right now or find the link in the description below. It is the kind of resource you open before you clear out a garage, not after. Now, number 7 is the one that surprises people the most in this first half of the list, so stay with me. Number 7. Viewmaster Reels and Viewers. I know. This one feels too ordinary. But hear me out, because the value is not in the plastic viewer itself. It is in the reels, and specifically in the early Sawyer's brand reels produced before GAF bought the company in 1966. Sawyer's was the original Viewmaster manufacturer, and their reels from the 1940s and 50s, particularly travel series covering national parks, world fairs, and international destinations, have a collector market that most people overlook entirely. A complete set of 3 reels in the original envelope with the original envelope art intact can go for $40 to $120 per set, and certain rare titles push well past that. The check here is the reel packet itself. Sawyer's branded packets from this era have a specific cream-colored envelope with the Viewmaster logo in a particular red oval design. After GAF took over, the envelope design changed and the branding shifted. Look at the image quality through the viewer too. Early Sawyer's reels have an exceptional depth and color saturation that later reels simply do not match, because the early ones use Kodachrome film. If your grandmother had a box of these in a drawer and the envelopes still have that cream color and the oval logo, sit down before you look up the prices on some of those travel titles. Number 6. Corgi and Dinky diecast cars from the 1950s and 60s. Not Hot Wheels, not Matchbox from the last 30 years. I am talking about original Dinky toys, made by Meccano in Liverpool, and original Corgi toys, made in Swansea, Wales, both produced in England and imported to the United States in significant numbers. A mint or near mint Dinky Toys Super Toys truck or a Corgi Toys Aston Martin DB5 from the James Bond era in its original box can fetch between $150 and $600 depending on condition and specific model. The test on these is to look at the base plate. Genuine Dinky pieces have a die-cast metal base with the word Dinky Toys and sometimes Meccano or Made in England cast directly into the metal. Corgi pieces similarly have their name and origin cast into the base. The paint on originals from this era is a different quality than later versions, often slightly thicker and with a slight matte depth rather than a bright plastic shine. Check the wheels too. Early Dinky toys used a spun aluminum or a solid metal wheel, not rubber tires on plastic rims. If you have the original box, even a damaged box, that dramatically raises the value. A lot of American children received these as gifts from relatives in England or as airport souvenirs in the 60s. They went into toy boxes and then into attics and have been there ever since. If you are finding this useful, a quick like really does help, and I want you to stick around because the next 4 items are where the real value starts to climb. Number 5, early G.I. Joe figures. Not the 1980s small figures, the original 12-inch figures produced by Hasbro starting in 1964. These are the ones with the hard plastic head, the flocked hair that looks almost real to the touch, the scar on the right cheek, and the movable joints at the shoulders, hips, knees, and elbows. A complete early G.I. Joe with original uniform, original dog tag, and the small Hasbro copyright date visible on the back of the neck can go for $150 to over $500. The earliest versions from 64 and 65 specifically have a patent number stamped on the lower back in the format PAT, penned, rather than a full number, and those are the ones that attract the most interest. Check the back of the neck and the lower back of the figure for that marking. Also check the thumb. On original 1964 to 1967 figures, the thumb on the right hand is separate from the fingers and often has a small hole in it for holding accessories. Later figures changed this design. If your figure has the separate right thumb, the neck mark, and any original uniform elements still present, it is a meaningful find. Many of these were given to boys in the mid-60s by fathers who had served in the military and saw something significant in the toy. They ended up in footlockers and storage boxes and have a particular kind of personal history attached to them. Number 4. Star Wars action figures from the first wave. Specifically, the 12 original figures produced by Kenner between 1977 and 1978. The double telescoping lightsaber versions of Luke Skywalker, Darth Vader, and Ben Kenobi are the ones that get the extraordinary prices, but even standard early figures with their original capes, weapons, and the small copyright stamp on the back of the leg that reads GMFGI, or Hong Kong, can sell for anywhere from $40 to several $100s each for clean examples. A complete first 12 in excellent condition as a group can represent a 4-figure total value without breaking a sweat. The test on these is to look at the leg stamp. All genuine Kenner First Wave figures have a copyright stamp on the inside of one leg, usually the left, that includes either GMFGI for the very early production or LFL for Lucasfilm Limited, along with the year and country of manufacture. Repro figures and modern releases have different stamp formats. Also, check the capes on the figures that had them. Obi-Wan Kenobi's original cape was a simple vinyl material, not fabric, and the early Darth Vader cape had a specific texture. A lot of these were purchased for children who are now in their 40s and 50s, and whose parents kept the toys in a closet or garage for decades. Number 3. Ideal and Madame Alexander dolls from the 1940s through the 1960s. These are not the plastic Barbie-adjacent dolls of the 70s. I am talking about the hard composition or early hard plastic dolls with glass or early acrylic sleep eyes, mohair wigs, and cloth or original tagged clothing. A Madame Alexander sissy doll in original tagged dress from the late 1950s can go for $200 to over $800 in excellent condition. Ideal Tony dolls from the early 1950s with their original Tony wave set boxes and nylon wigs have been selling steadily in the $300 range for complete examples. The check here is the tag. Madame Alexander tagged every outfit they produced, and the paper hang tag or sewn fabric label inside the clothing is the single most important marker. Look for Madame Alexander New York on either a sewn label or a small metal snap tag. For Ideal Tony dolls, look for the P mold number on the back of the head, which Ideal used consistently to identify their hard plastic dolls from this era. The presence of original clothing, the original tag, and the original box, if any is present, can triple the value of an already valuable piece. These were given to daughters and granddaughters as serious gifts, and a lot of families kept them displayed under glass rather than played with, which means they sometimes survive in remarkable condition. I am not going to inflate this one. Number 2 is common. You might have a dozen of them in a box and not realize 1 or 2 are genuinely significant. Classic Lionel O-gauge train sets, not the general category. Specifically, the pre-war Lionel sets from the 1930s and early 1940s, or the immediate post-war sets from 45 through 48 before Lionel redesigned their locomotive styling. The pre-war number 226 locomotive in gunmetal gray with the matching 227 tender, for example, carries a current market value in working condition of $350 to over $500 for the locomotive and tender pair alone. The post-war 221 locomotive in the dark green variation from 1946 is similarly strong. Here is your check. Open the locomotive and look at the motor. Lionel used a specific E-unit reverse mechanism on their pre-war and early post-war locomotives, a small drum-style reversing unit that clicks audibly through its cycle when you power it. If you turn on the track power and the locomotive reverses direction with that distinctive click-through sequence, the mechanism is original and intact. Also look for the number stamped on the side of the boiler cab. Lionel stamped every locomotive model number directly onto the metal, and cross-referencing that number with the pre-war or early post-war production lists immediately tells you what you have. A lot of these came down from attics where a grandfather had stored them after his children grew up, packed carefully in the original orange Lionel boxes with the red lettering. If that box is there, do not throw it away. The box is part of the value. And that brings us to number 1. The one that almost every family in this country has owned at some point, and almost nobody looks at carefully. The original Little Golden Books from the 1940s and early 1950s. Specifically, the very first editions, identified by the code A on the bottom of the spine, which was the internal print code Western Publishing used for first printings of the earliest titles. The first 12 titles in the series, including The Pokey Little Puppy, Nursery Tales and Mother Goose, were published by Simon & Schuster beginning in 1942 and sold for 25 cents each. A first printing of the Pokey Little Puppy in good reading condition with the original spine intact carries an estimated value of $200 to over $400. A near-fine copy with the original dust jacket, which most copies were sold without, can go significantly higher. The test is the spine code. Turn the book spine upward and look at the very bottom of the spine near the binding edge. A first printing will have the letter A printed there alone, small and easy to miss. Later printings use numbers or letter-number combinations. Also, check the pages. First edition copies from 42 and 43 have a specific paper quality, slightly heavier and creamier than the thinner paper used in later mass reprintings. The copyright page should read Copyright 1942 for the original titles, and the back cover of early copies listed only the first 12 titles in the series, which is a quick confirmation of early production. These were read to every American child in the 1940s and 50s. They sat on bookshelves and in toy chests and ended up in boxes in attics labeled kids' books without a second thought. The fact that they were so common is exactly why so many families still have them. If you found value in this video, please subscribe to the channel. There are a lot more categories where this came from, and I want to make sure you do not miss them. Now here is what I want to know. Do you have any of these in your home right now? Tell me in the comments, which one did you find? Whose was it? And do you still have it? I read every single comment, and some of the stories people share in this community are genuinely remarkable. Take a closer look at what you already own. You might be sitting on more than you think.